what was actually just a relatively simple closed arena has been changed. The landscape has been changed by a rebel bombing earlier in the story. So now you have the ceiling has caved in, creating this big pile of rubble in the center, which we like to think is sort of the beginning of the inspiration for all the cornucopias in the following years, that you can see in the first movie or you can see it in Catching Fire. Hello, I'm Francis Lawrence. I'm the director of The Hunger Games Catching Fire, Mockingjay 1, Mockingjay 2, and also The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This is notes on some scenes.
Enjoy the show.
Fire is catching.
Too gentle. And I couldn't save her.
So we actually shot a lot of Catching Fire in Atlanta. A lot of people don't think about, unless you live there, is that it's a train town, a big train town. So there were trains going by all the time. So just as you would get into this big emotional scene and she's, about to sort of cry and giving it her all, this big, loud train would go by and we'd have to cut. So we had to actually hire train scouts to go sit on the tracks and tell us when trains were coming and give us warnings about trains and how long the trains were going to be and how long we'd have to wait. So that was definitely a big technical thing. But also because we're in Atlanta, we had to sort of fake locations. And so we found this part of an old train yard where we sort of built the set for this district's House of Justice where she's giving the speech from. But in the background, what we've done, you can see here that we've kind of comped in back here, is a fake background that sort of gives the idea and the impression that we're actually in a completely different district. And so we did a lot of that in this victory tour, where we're just truthfully moving around Atlanta, shooting in slightly different places with little pieces of sets we built, and then kind of comping in different scenes of countryside in the background. We didn't really have this many people, so we were utilizing probably a couple hundred people and making it look like a lot more. So all these people back here are duplicated from the crowd that you see like up in the front. So I'm sure if you took a really close look, you'd probably see some of the same people peppered around in the background.
I have a message for President Snow. You can torture us and bomb us and burn our districts to the ground. But do you see that? Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
One of the things that I always like to do is to try to be as intimate with the characters as possible. I like using wider lenses because you can be up closer to people and you don't feel too distanced from everybody. But at the same time, when you use a wider lens, you still get a sense of geography and a sense of space. Part of what's impactful, right, is that she's surrounded by the fire and the leftover explosion and the wreckage of the hovercraft and the wreckage of the hospital that's been bombed. But really, you want to feel the sort of the emotion and the anger that's pouring out of her while still feeling what it is that she's angry about. We were in, I think it was a tire factory or something, so this brick structures, which we used as the exterior of the hospital. We aged it down digitally, and then when we got to the bombing here, our special effects teams, our practical effects teams, actually set up a bunch of rubble and a bunch of the real flames that were very, very intense and very, very hot to be around, which adds to the mood and the atmosphere. Technically, if you look at a shot like this, we had some of the wreckage that you can see behind our group here. We probably had, maybe this much of the wreckage, and a lot of these flames are real. These are old buildings that actually existed. Some of these holes and some of the damage was added. But as soon as you get up here and you start to see a lot of this wreckage, the flames, all the stuff higher, that's all digitally added. What I like about this kind of process is it makes it really immersive for the actors to be standing there, to feel the heat, for the smoke to be wafting around, for there to be real rubble and all of that. But then digitally we can build it much bigger and make it even more intense and increase the scope that we would never be able to afford to build practically. One small detail is here, if you look at Pollux's gear, the rigs that they wore and these little cameras, those were all digital as well. And so often we put reflections of Katniss in his helmet because it has like a little heads-up display, and these little sort of operated cameras were always digital, so they could kind of move around as if they were following the action. Jen's definitely a very instinctual actor. And so what typically I would do on a day like this is I would just remind her, especially because we were doing the Mockingjays back to back, where she was in the story of her sort of radicalization against Snow and becoming an active part of the rebellion and embracing the idea of being the Mockingjay. And so I would do that, but then it's very easy as soon as, you know, the smoke is going and the flames are up for her to give this kind of a rousing speech.
Today, the greatest friend to the revolution will fire the shot to end all wars. May her arrow signify the end of tyranny.
This is the climactic scene sequence in Mockingjay Part 2. They're going to execute President Snow. But what's happened before this is that we've learned, and this is part of the beauty of Suzanne's story, she's discovered that Coin could be just as, if not more evil than President Snow. And so she's making the decision here to not shoot Snow, but to shoot President Coin instead. Most of what you're seeing is practical, except for the ground. I think if you look at all these kind of paving stones, we couldn't cover everything here. So the paving stones are actually CG. And the other thing that we always did, which was primarily for safety, is this arrow that you see right here, that is digital. So we never actually pointed any real arrows at anybody ever, because it was just too dangerous, whether it's for a camera person or for another actor. We just always wanted to be safe. So we always use digital arrows. This shot here, there's definitely some trickiness, but it's, I think, not where people would really suspect. You really have Julianne, because she's not gonna do her fall here. She's gonna get hit by a digital arrow, fall to her knees, and start to look like she's gonna fall off the edge. But she doesn't in a shot like this. The really tricky one and the sad one here is that Phil Hoffman, who you can see here standing in the back off to the right, had died by the time that we shot this scene. So we had to find footage of him from other parts of the movies, have a stand-in stay there, and then use and comp his face from another scene onto him there. Here, he's very small. Most people don't even know that's Phil Hoffman, but we had to comp Phil Hoffman in there.
In my hand, an envelope. Sealed. My prediction. The winner to be opened by me upon the big show's end. Whoa. They're here. All right, we're about to start. We're starting, everyone. We're starting.
In Berlin, we used the Olympic Stadium, the famous one that was used in the 30s Olympics with Jesse Owens, where he ran. And this space, circular space, that we used as the auditorium for the mentors and for academy students to be watching the games, is actually the fencing arena in the Olympic Park. A bunch of the tech, which was a big conversation that we had with Suzanne Collins, the author, and amongst ourselves, was that everything, again, needed to be much more rudimentary. And because we were looking at sort of Reconstruction era Berlin as a reference point for the city of the capital of Panem in general, we decided to sort of look at the 40s and the 50s also for technology and for some of the aesthetics. So this informs, you know, hair and makeup and styling and some of the screens and all of that. And you can really see that sort of 40s, 50s influence throughout the movie, almost like a sort of a retro future kind of a feel. What we have here is we actually had the screens in this stage built, the control rooms. We had some interactive iPads that you can see were on the screens on the mentors' desks. So if you see here, and here, those were actually iPads that were programmed, were live. We had screens built in here, and so the elements of all the tributes had been shot by my assistant, Haiti de Jesus, who became the second unit director on this movie. She shot all of these tributes at various times throughout the shooting. They were then comped into with these graphics and then actually projected on the screen. So the truth is here, almost everything you're seeing is actually there and live. And also because we shot the games ahead of time, we could pump footage of games through the TV for our actors to watch. So when we were watching the tributes walk in, they could literally see these shots as if shot by TV cameras in the arena itself. One of the exciting things for me about tackling this prequel was all the new world building that I got to do. And part of that is that we get to see the origins of a lot of things that we're used to in the old stories and the old movies. One of them, which you can see in this scene, is the arena. The first 9 years of the games have been in a very simplistic and very rudimentary place. They were in a walled-off arena, weapons are in the middle, the kids are there. it starts and it's probably over very, very quickly. What was actually just a relatively simple closed arena with a wall, and it used to have weapons in the center, has been changed. The landscape has been changed by a rebel bombing earlier in the story. So now you have the ceiling has caved in, creating this big pile of rubble in the center, which we like to think is sort of the beginning of the inspiration for all the cornucopias in the following years that you can see in the first movie or you can see it in Catching Fire. But it also creates more sort of obstacles for people too. Other pieces of rubble mean you can go up into the stands. Some holes have been knocked out in the floor so you could go down into the tunnels below. So this, the 10th year of the Hunger Games, is the first time that this simple arena has opened up the landscape a little bit and has kind of changed the environments and becomes kind of the catalyst for further games to be more inventive in terms of the landscape. Uli found this amazing place called Centennial Hall in Western Poland, in Wrocław, and we luckily found a 6-week window where they would sort of let us move in and do what we wanted to do with it. It clearly is not in as bad of shape as it looks like it is here. There are no holes in the ceiling, and there certainly isn't this much rubble. So what we did, which was great, was we added our own big important pieces of rubble, like pile in the center here or off to the left leading up to the stands. A lot of the stuff on the ground was added in practical. Some of the banners were practical. But what we had to do was we had to digitally break open this hole. We had to age and damage all of the sort of bleachers because they were bright orange and very clean. We had to add more age and damage to all the walls. So the truth is that even though we have the structure that gives the basic shape and gives the actors and the characters like the real immersion they need to feel the scene, we have all that. But almost every frame within the arena was touched digitally somehow and augmented to look and feel as damaged as it does in the movie.
Stand on your mark, or you will be shot.
Thank you for joining notes on some scenes, and I hope you enjoy it, but I hope you enjoy the movie even more. Thank you.